Welcome to Intuitive Conversations, a podcast about intuition, spirituality, and growth. And I'm your host, psychic, medium, and intuitive artist, Nicole Bowman. I want to thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today and for sharing your light with me. If you are brand new, welcome. And if you have been following for a minute, welcome back. So today we're going to be doing a show that I've been very excited about. This is probably one of my favorite episodes, and I think it's one of the most important ones. This show is called Talking to God. And today we're going to talk a little bit about how to build a relationship with God. Whatever word you call God is perfectly okay for you. It could be God, Allah, Hashem, Great Spirit, Creator. Whatever word works for you, works for you. But I know for a lot of people, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of trepidation, there's a lot of concern about how to approach your Creator. I think the important thing to know is that each and every one of us is a spark of the divine in human form. We're here to live out our joy, to live out our bliss, to learn amazing lessons. And once our bodies wither, and once we cross that veil to the other side, we go home. But while we're here, I think it's so important to live a life that matters. I think it's so important to make and build magic. And the way you do that is by talking to God. So today I'm going to share some of my tips for how to talk to God and how to build and strengthen that relationship. And I'm sure by the end of this broadcast, you'll have some tips and ideas of your own. One of the things that I want to impress upon you is that you don't just have to go to God when things are rocky in your life or when there's something that you need. I say instead, see God like a long-lost friend that you reconnect with, that you reconvene with, and that you begin to talk to every day. And with time, it'll no longer feel like a long-lost friend. It'll feel like home. It'll feel like family. When I was a little kid, I always knew that God existed. And I can't really tell you how I knew that. I just knew. I always felt this presence around me. It was a strong, loving presence. And I knew that I was going to be okay. I also knew that there was something before the life that I incarnated into, and I knew there was something after this. And there were times when I was a little kid, I would go into my backyard and I would sit on my swing and I would talk to God. I would talk about my life. I would talk about my dreams. I would talk about the things that I wanted to do and I wanted to be. And there were many times as I was talking to God, the Divine Mother, that feminine energy, that feminine aspect would come in as well. And she would sit with me too. And they would listen to me just talk and laugh and dream. And as I grew up and I went into high school and college and I became an adult, life started to get kind of difficult for me. I didn't question God's existence, but I began to question mine. Why was I here? What was I here to do? Everything was so hard. I was in New York at a conservatory. I was studying theater. I was in a highly competitive program. And as much as I knew I needed to be there in that time, I was deeply unhappy. And there were times where I would just cry out to God. There were times when I would ask God, does any of this matter at all? Why am I here? And I have to tell you that each and every time I did that, God was there with me and God listened. And as I graduated from school and I went off into my field and I continued to perform, I would feel the call and the stirring from my Creator. And many years ago, when I was still performing, I got the call from Creator that it was time for me to read professionally for people. God said to me, it's time for you to share your intuitive and your psychic gifts with people. It's time for you to teach people how to have a relationship with me. And you can help them do it. And so I took the call, and I did. And well over a decade later, here I am talking to you about God. I'm talking to you about spirit. I'm talking to you about that divine relationship. One of my favorite things to do is to go outside into nature and have a walk with God and have a talk. I was thinking of a beautiful song by Stevie Wonder that is called just that, Have a Talk with God. And I recommend after this podcast is over, you listen to it because it's a song that has healing power. But this is the thing. If you get out in nature and you just start talking to God the way that you talk to a friend, eventually you're going to feel that energy, you're going to feel that presence, and you're going to start building a relationship. And you may consider yourself religious or non-religious. You may consider yourself more spiritual. If you grew up in a religion that you still practice and love, go to the holy books and the scriptures in your religion and ask God to show you which scriptures you need to read. If you love poetry, if you love music, if you love art, call out to God and ask God to guide you to pieces of art and books and music and poetry that will speak to your soul. God speaks through music. God speaks through dreams. God speaks through nature. You have to remember, God is a part of you and you are a part of God. So it's not always about reaching out to God when things are difficult or you need something. It's more about strengthening that connection every day. One thing that you will find as well is if you strengthen that connection, God will speak to you through dreams. God will speak to you through warnings. God will give you strong senses and impulses of the directions you need to go. And with each passing day, you'll get more confident because you'll know you're not alone. And that's the point. We are not in this world alone. When you develop your intuition and you reach out to your Creator, you are powerful. You're powerful because you're empowered by the one who sent you. You're a spirit spark. I use that word sometimes, and I am laughing about it, but think about it. You're a spirit spark. You're a spark of the divine in human form. You're a spark of light. You're a spark of joy. You're a spark of energy. And so you just need to trust. I am feeling like I'm speaking to somebody right now who is going to listen to this eventually. And sometimes this happens when I'm doing podcast because I'm tapping into the energy of the collective and I'm guided to deliver a message. You may have thought that God forgot about you, but God didn't. You have always been connected. And even though things are confusing and even though things are dark right now, you're going to step into the light. What's happening right now is that you're just in a bit of a holding pattern because you're being protected. So the silence, the quiet, the darkness, the solitude. I know it's difficult. I know it's confusing. I know you're waiting for your turn, and your turn at success is coming. But what you're experiencing now is a hibernation period and an incubation period, and it is protection. So continue to talk to God. Continue to get out in nature. Don't lose sight of your dreams. but understand it will happen in divine timing. I hope you enjoyed this podcast today. For readings and more, you can connect with me at NicoleBowman.biz. And if you loved and enjoyed this podcast, please rate, subscribe, share it on your socials. I would be so appreciative. And if you have questions or there's a podcast you want to listen to, send me an email at intuitivenicoleb@gmail.com. Once again, that is intuitivenicoleb@gmail.com. And as I say, always remember to live your light, live your bliss, love yourself, and trust your intuition. Ashe.